Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Animal Artists Collective video. The AAC is an initiative founded by Denise Soden and Jennifer Charlie to raise awareness about animal conservation through education and art. Each piece created for the AAC is available for purchase, with half the proceeds going to animal conservation and welfare. Our theme for March is birds, and for this painting I featured the Ivory-Billed Woodpecker. Maybe you've heard of it, or maybe you haven't. It's something of a myth in the birding world. Though listed as critically endangered, there has been no universally accepted proof of their continued existence in decades. The last indisputable photographs of ivory-billed woodpeckers and their Cuban subspecies were taken in the 1930s and 40s, and since then, ornithologists and bird enthusiasts alike have attempted to discern if the species still lives on without our knowing. In recent years, there has been evidence published that suggests they might still be living in the southeastern United States, but these have been received with skepticism. So they call it the Holy Grail bird. If anyone got hard photographic evidence of the ivory-billed woodpecker today, they would be seeing a bird that hasn't been seen in almost 100 years. Species have been labeled extinct only to be found living later, like what happened with the coelacanth fish, so it's not to be ruled out entirely, but the deforestation of primeval hardwood forests, the ivory-billed woodpecker's historical habitat, decreased the resources available for the success of the species and, thus, decreased their population. One lucky thing about birds in America, though, is that we have rather detailed, intimate recordings of their life from John James Audubon. He was a strange fellow, and certainly not a friend to animals, but his fascination with birds leaves us with interesting journal entries on some, like the ivory-billed woodpecker, passenger pigeon, and Carolina parakeet, that might not be with us today. In his Ornithological Biography, Audubon writes, "I have always imagined that in the plumage of the beautiful ivory-billed woodpecker there is something very closely allied to the style of coloring of the great Van Dyck. The broad extent of its dark glossy body and tail, the large and well-defined white markings of its wings, neck, and till, relieved by the rich carmine of the pendant crest of the male and the brilliant yellow of its eye, have never failed to remind me of some of the boldest and noblest productions of that inimitable artist's pencil. So strong, indeed, have these thoughts become engrafted in my mind, as I gradually obtained a more intimate acquaintance with the ivory-billed woodpecker, that whenever I have observed one of these birds flying from one tree to another, I have mentally exclaimed, 'There goes a Van Dyck!' This notion may seem strange, perhaps ludicrous to you, good reader, but I relate it as a fact, and whether or not it may be found in accordance with your own ideas after you have inspected the plate in which is represented the great chieftain of the woodpecker tribe is perhaps of little consequence." The flight of this bird is graceful in the extreme, although seldom prolonged to more than a few hundred yards at a time, unless when it has to cross a large river, which it does in deep undulations, opening its wings at first to their full extent and nearly closing them to renew the propelling impulse. The transit from one tree to another, even should the distance be as much as 100 yards, is performed by a single sweep, and the bird appears as if merely swinging itself from the top of one tree to that of the other, forming an elegantly curved line. At this moment, all the beauty of the plumage is exhibited, and strikes the beholder with pleasure. It never utters any sound whilst on wing, unless during the love season, but at all other times no sooner has this bird alighted than its remarkable voice is heard, at almost every leap which it makes, whilst descending against the upper parts of the trunk of the tree, or its highest branches. Its notes are clear, loud, and yet rather plaintive. They are heard at a considerable distance, perhaps half a mile, and resemble the false high note of a clarinet. They are usually repeated 3 times in succession, and may be represented by the monosyllable pite, pite. I wish, kind reader, it were in my power to present to your mind's eye the favorite resort of the ivory-billed woodpecker. Would that I could describe the extent of those deep morasses, overshadowed by millions of gigantic dark cypresses, spreading their sturdy moss-covered branches as if to admonish intruding man to pause and reflect on the many difficulties which he must encounter should he persist in venturing further into their almost inaccessible recesses, extending for miles before him, where he should be interrupted by huge projecting branches, here and there the massy trunk of a fallen and decaying tree, and thousands of creeping and twining plants of numberless species. Would that I could represent to you the dangerous nature of the ground, its oozing, spongy, and miry disposition, although covered with a beautiful but treacherous carpeting composed of the richest mosses, flags, and water lilies, no sooner receiving the pressure of the foot than it yields and endangers the very life of the adventurer, whilst here and there, as he approaches an opening that proves merely a lake of black muddy water, his ear is assailed by the dismal croaking of innumerable frogs, the hissing of serpents, or the bellowing of alligators. Would that I could give you an idea of the sultry, pestiferous atmosphere that nearly suffocates the intruder during the meridian heat of our dog days in those gloomy and horrible swamps. But the attempt to picture these scenes would be in vain. Nothing short of ocular demonstration can impress any adequate idea of them. The ivory-billed woodpecker has possibly gone the way of the thylacine or the elephant bird, but through conservation we can keep other species from meeting the same ghostly fate. This painting, inscribed with the Latin phrase "gone but not forgotten," will be available in my Etsy store, and half of the proceeds will go to the Alberta Birds of Prey Foundation, who rescue and rehabilitate raptors in my home province here in Canada. For this illustration, I wanted to evoke some of the mythical qualities that animals gain when they're endangered or extinct. Creatures don't have to be literal unicorns to start gathering a bit of mysticism and myth. Like I mentioned before, this woodpecker is sometimes called the Holy Grail bird, and to me that conjures some feelings of medievalism or crusades, something a little older, so I drew the bird in an almost draconic stance, with a serpentine tongue and a raised claw. The banner anchoring the composition echoes the red of the bird's crest, and also adds an extra heraldic element. The lettering, which you can see me doing in the video's intro, is written in an old uncial style. Maybe people looking for evidence of the ivory-billed woodpecker feel a bit like dragon hunters, or maybe that just seems cool to me. I get a bit of a magical thrill when I come across birds I've been hoping to see, so to find one that hasn't been seen in ages must be something else entirely. As for technical details, I started this painting off in watercolor and finished it with a few layers of gouache. I'm using some cheap brushes and a Canson watercolor board. It was fun mixing the precision of a small brush with the natural, organic textures that come out of just letting the water do what it wants, and I think I've achieved some pretty effects. Overall, I'm really happy with how this piece turned out, especially the crest of the bird. And there's something to be said for knowing when to stop and just letting the brush strokes be what they are. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and remember to check out all the other AAC artworks being uploaded today. Thanks for watching. Bye!